Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening, and welcome to the Brothers of Dynasty live stream edition. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, joined as always by my brothers Jay and Andrew, and also joined by a special guest tonight, Mr. Geoff Lambert, the founder of the Going for Two. I was going to say the Going for Two podcast network, but it's a whole site, goingfor2.com, and as well as many podcasts, one that you've heard Jay promote that he's on, the fantasy cheat sheet that he's on. And if you want to catch Geoff's own podcast, that's called the Armchair Fantasy Show as well. Geoff Lambert, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I haven't been podcasting this month. I took this month off, so this is kind of my scratching my itch to podcast. We don't start podcasting again until early February.
Gotta get back on the mic and be on the shows and get out there. You just gotta
get some reps in, you know.
Mainline that fantasy football podcast straight into the vein. As we always do, I'm gonna ask you what you're drinking tonight.
So I have a Sam Adams Winter Lager tonight. I'm going simple tonight.
Getting that allspice, that heavy, dark, malty beer going. Jay, how about you? What are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I am drinking High Lie. This is one of my favorite breweries down in Tampa, Florida, Cigar City Brewing.
Is this celebrating? Are you drinking in remembrance of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I am. I poured a little out for the Buccaneers. We hardly knew you. Defending champs going down this week into the Rams. But yeah, for our boy Tom Brady in remembrance. Talking retirement, so gonna drink the Tampa beer tonight.
Is that really gonna happen? I doubt it. I don't think that's gonna happen. Andrew, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking not beer. Nope, I got water again. This week, water brought to you by Unparalleled Climbing.
Okay. That's, again, are you doing... I know you're not doing dry January. I saw you drink
multiple times
this past weekend.
No, yeah.
You're just not drinking on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
You're doing dry.
It's no longer a thing. I'm currently driving as we speak.
Doing dry
from the background that makes
it
look
a great
like
green screen behind you. Really, it looks like your living room, but that's weird.
What is that?
I am going down the highway at about 75 miles per hour right now.
True. The classic.
Some might say this is dangerous, but I think we'll get through.
Yeah, I mean, I knew because that's the classic interior design of the 1993 Toyota Tercel, so I know what's up there.
Yeah, for sure. And look at my attention to holding the steering wheel, so obviously.
Just straight up knee driving now. Right? That's how everyone does it. What am I drinking, you ask? Well, I'm drinking a White Claw, baby. Getting white girl wasted over here in Upper Manhattan. Tonight, and that's all I have to say on that. Let's get to some football because I'm just excited to talk about what was arguably the greatest weekend of playoff football ever. Every single game came down to the final play. What were you going to say?
I thought you were going to say the greatest draft class.
The greatest draft. No, we'll get to that in a little bit. We will be redrafting in our redraftable series the 2019 draft class. We'll do a Superflex tight end premium 2-round draft, and spoiler alert, it's a struggle towards the end of the second round. But what wasn't a struggle was watching these games this past weekend. Obviously, all of you were not living under a rock. You all saw these games, or at least saw the finales and highlights of these games. Geoff, since you're a guest, I'll give you the first crack at your reactions to this weekend, and I think one team that has a pretty special place in your heart.
Yeah, so my Niners, in case you didn't notice, I'm wearing the Niners hat. They beat the Packers, and that's my wife's team. Her whole family's from Wisconsin, so we kind of got their number. I think we're now 4-0 against Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, so we kind of got their number. So obviously that was an exciting game for me. The first game of that day, Saturday, the Raiders and Bengals, of course, had the controversy with the whistle and all that stuff. It was a good game. It was a good setup for the weekend. It was close, came down to the last kick. Then the Niners game was a little slow for those that don't like to watch defensive games, but it was ended up being a great game. And then the Sunday games, talk about ridiculous offenses. It was just insane. Like, you're watching that Tom Brady come back with the Rams, 27-3, reminiscent of the Falcons 28-3. He comes all the way back, ties it up. You think, oh my God, here we go again. And then Matthew Stafford says, "Oh no, that's not how this is going to work this time," and ends up getting the field goal, getting the game winner there. And then the last game, of course, I mean, that might be like the game of like the century. I mean, that was just a ridiculous. I mean, how many points were scored in that, like the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter?
25 points were scored in the last 2 minutes of the game.
That is insane.
Before overtime.
Yeah, and then of course Patrick Mahomes with his 13 seconds, go 45 yards. The Cowboys couldn't even go down the field in 14 seconds. Yeah, so it was an amazing game. I do feel bad for the Bills. They didn't get a chance to even get their offense on the field in the overtime, but what a game. I mean, what a game to cement Patrick Mahomes. He's amazing. He does things that no one else can do.
Yeah, it was absolutely unreal. And I mean, it just kind of drives home the need for teams. As amazing as Patrick Mahomes is, it's just made that much more by having two of the best playmakers in the league. Travis Kelce was obviously integral. And that touchdown where Tyreek Hill just turned on the Jets, that's unreal. Like, I was thinking about that. Like, I think Debo is sneakily, I think people think people think Tyreek Hill is like old, so they're dropping him down their dynasty ranks. No, top 3. I don't know how. He's unreal. I don't know how you can fade Tyreek Hill.
Did y'all see the still of the run, and he's saying peace to the guy that's actually in front of him?
Who's ahead of him?
That was awesome.
Unreal.
Yeah, there's a still of where he started, and like it's like he scored a touchdown on this play thing, and you're like, there's no way. There's like guys
everywhere,
several guys everywhere, and you're like, it's one of those ones where every guy takes the wrong angle, and once he gets a little space, he's so fast it doesn't matter. That's why he can do the peace sign, because he's just like, yeah, you have no chance at time.
And just his foot, like that, like where a guy thinks they have his leg wrapped up, and he just steps out of it, like with this quick flip. Like, it's unbelievable to watch. And
we've seen fast guys before. We've seen people who are fast, but it's not
his nimbleness and like agility is.
I believe you mean.
Really adds to
I believe you mean nimbility.
I did mean nimbility. Thank you for correcting me. But also,
Andrew, go on. React to give us your takes from the past weekend.
Yeah, and just as finishing with the age thing, Tyreek Hill's going to be 28 in March. And I think we've talked already about how we hear the number 28 for receivers be sort of this like anticipated cliff. And I just don't think that's the case. Like, besides the fact that you can't give hard numbers, I think for a lot of positions, I think that's a terrible place to put that line for receiver, because we've just seen too many guys continue to be highly productive past that point.
And what do you think you're going to be doing in 3 years from now? Still playing that league's going to be imploded. Climate change is coming for us all. How many years? It's more egregious when people are like, yeah, but you locked down this QB for 15 years as opposed to 10 years with this guy. That's a major value. What? I could be dead. You could all be dead in 10 years. What do you expect to be doing?
I don't know what I'm bringing us all down.
Josh, the fantasy nihilist.
Yeah, exactly.
But
the fantasy nihilist. That's my new handle.
Hot take. I also thought the Buffalo game was one of the greatest games I've ever watched. Possibly one of the greatest games of all time. That one was incredible, and I think. Major takeaway from that is that I'm a little worried, being a Patriots fan or anyone in a similar situation, whether you're the Browns or not, when you see quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen who can do what they did out there and just turn it on, put the team on their back and just dominate as needed. And then maybe you've got one of the up-and-comers like the Joe Burrows that seem like they're developing well. That obviously we love Justin Herbert. Didn't come to mind first just because, unfortunately, Chargers didn't make the playoffs. But if you don't have one of those guys, boo indeed. If you don't have one of those guys, you got to be feeling like a little shaky on the future of you being able to cut through that. Because it's like, even if you can pull a good win, like say the Pats had upset the Bills in that first round, which was so low percentage. What are you gonna go beat the Chiefs next round? Like the likelihood of that feels so low.
Imagine being a Raiders or Broncos fan, and you got Herbert and Mahomes in your division.
Yeah, in your division.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's on the table that you have to beat Burrow, Allen, and Mahomes every year. You might have to beat all three in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl every year, potentially.
Or some combination. You throw Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert in there as well, and that's just a gauntlet. How do you expect? Everything has to go perfect for you if we're sticking with, to use the Patriots in this, because we've seen Mac Jones doesn't have we know his arm strength's not at the same level as these guys. We know he's not super mobile. I just don't see how you win with him without basically having everything else around him be perfect.
Yeah,
with this gauntlet.
As long as you're drafting perfect in 2019, you take Debo with your first round pick as opposed to a N'Keal Harry. You can't be making those mistakes. No. So a little worrisome, but I guess I'm excited for the fans of those other teams because they're going to be in the mix for years now. I'm just not so sure about these other teams that are more in transition or have kind of missed out on those players. So that's kind of my big picture take.
That is like a scary thing, and we've seen a lot of turnover at the QB position. And if you just see the direction that the position's going, and nobody's played the position like Mahomes and Allen have played it before. That's just not been a thing. And those guys are not going away. You've got a few other guys that are like them in the mix as well, in both conferences. If you're a team like the Tennessee Titans with Ryan Tannehill or the Oakland Raiders with Derek Carr, do you think a game like that basically single-handedly moved the QB needle downwards on the likelihood of job security for some of these guys? Jay, I'll throw that to you.
I think it's a good idea. I don't know if those teams have any other options. I mean, you're taking swings in a draft class this year that's not top heavy at quarterback. Every mock and the analyst I've read so far says, if I'm ranking classes last year, put them all together, last year's class and this year's class, the Ritters, the Pickett's, Malik Willis, they're sixth. That's where you're starting, when you throw them into last year's class. So it's not like you're going to be throwing a dart at a guy this year and hoping you hit on a guy that was a little under the radar, Russell Wilson-esque or Tom Brady-esque guys who went farther down in the draft and became franchise quarterbacks. That's what you're swinging for this year. If you're taking a guy this year, there's not a lot of, you're not getting at free agency either. You're not going to, grab or trade for Kirk Cousins or something like that and solve your QB situation. He's in the same boat because Minnesota might be moving on too. I think they're all taking a hard look. I just don't know if they have a lot of options right now. To move that bar higher for their quarterback.
I think luckily for a team like Tennessee, they sort of have the running back equivalent of that can do everything type of guy in Derrick Henry. So maybe they feel a little bit more confident just because the team seems to go through him as a playmaker. But I think across the board, you make a really good point that it's a bit worrisome for these QBs that sort of fall short or, they've got 8 years in and just are obviously not the guy.
Or your hope is Rodgers for a year or Wilson for a year. Those are the other.
I feel like with the Titans too, it's almost like they had to zig when everybody else is zagging. Everybody's taking these quarterbacks high flying. They're like, all right, we got Derrick Henry. We're giving the ball 40 times. No one else does that. So in that sense, they're different than what other teams are going to see. So maybe they're not quite expecting it. But that's their only hope. They're not going to, land a Josh Allen or Mahomes type in the draft. They don't come around often enough to say, let's go out and get one of those guys. If it was that easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
49ers have the same blueprint too. 49ers run game's so good. There's that's their bread and butter. They're zigging too, because they got Jimmy G, so they're like, well, let's keep it out of his hand and we'll do the things we do well.
But at the same time, San Francisco gave up a lot of draft capital to move up and take Trey Lance, a raw but exceptionally
They're taking a swing
guy. That's more what I'm talking about here. A team's gonna start taking swings even if it leads to nothing. Like a team he probably won't fall this far, but if Tennessee wanted to and was sitting there and Malik Willis, a guy who seems to be very raw, but that kind of big arm, athletic, running, but could also develop into a passing QB. type guy is sitting there for them. Do they pass on that, even if it means that he sits and maybe doesn't develop and they basically burn a first round pick? I don't know. I think that's going to cross teams' minds a bit more, even if they, in what would have been 10 years ago, a stable QB situation, think there's going to be a little more risk taking because the position has been elevated by these young quarterbacks coming into the league.
Let me ask you a question real quick, not to change the subject, but sticking with the quarterbacks, I asked this to a lot of people. If you were an owner of a team and quarterback is the number one position basically in all of sports, would you be opposed to drafting 2 QBs in the same draft? Getting one in the first round, then getting one in the
Washington.
Like
Washington did
Yeah,
it.
I was just going to say that.
No, if you're desperate, no. Like, I mean, if you're the Texans, you should take like why not? Like, they're so bottomed out. They took Davis Mills last year. Take 2 this year too. Take 3.
Right. I think your team's not going to be good until you have a quarterback. So you can draft all the good pieces around it. If you don't have a quarterback, you might as well just take swings at take 2. Maybe you got Prescott or a Russell Wilson like we just mentioned, or maybe you hit on a Tom Brady in the 6th or 7th round. You never know. Having 2 quarterbacks isn't necessarily a bad thing if your team is that bad.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think it's harder for like the Titans, a team like that, because like they're probably thinking maybe I get a piece, like a defensive piece, or another receiver to pair with AJ Brown. They probably have a different mindset of like, we're the number 1 seed this year, like we're close. So a team like that probably doesn't do something like that because they're thinking they're in it, so they're going to be maybe swinging in a different way. But
agreed.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time with Tennessee, I wouldn't be against taking a 3rd or 4th round.
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering what their mindset is. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who's in the draft and what those guys you're evaluating are like. I don't think. It feels like people should be drafting a QB at some point in the draft every year.
That's kind of like a common thought. Yeah. Like you'll hear that batted around, but like I don't know, until you have your guy, like why not keep taking a shot at someone each year?
Patriots did that.
Yeah,
that's what the Patriots did for years. In 3rd and 4th round, they took guys like Ryan Mallett. They took Jacoby Brissett. They took Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously, although it was a 2nd round pick and probably was supposed to be the heir apparent. They've done that before. And those guys some of them have worked out a little more than others. Obviously, Jimmy G has had some success, although we all know his limitations in there. But I don't know, like, what is the minimum quarterback you need to be able to compete and win a Super Bowl? I guess it depends. There's no type, because I think in a lot of ways there are like quarterbacks who are more timely than others. Like you look at a guy like Kirk Cousins, who I think is the opposite of that, where he's good when it doesn't matter, but when it does matter, he doesn't seem to be good. Yep. But his stats would make you say, oh, this guy you should be able to win with. I don't know. I don't know what that minimum guy is now. Like, is it Jimmy Garoppolo, or is
Jimmy
that not
G's
quite
there?
enough right now?
But you have to have such a specific, I think, team to go with those guys, and that you're just adding levels of difficulty to your formula for winning. That it just everything else has to be a 10. Yeah, you
gotta have the right coach. You can't if a coach has a Ryan Tannehill, he's trying to run a Patrick Mahomes offense, it's not going to work. So you got to have the right coach that's willing to commit to whatever his players do the best of.
Yeah. Well, speaking of coaches, there was one other piece of news today. See that segue there? That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Unprofessional.
Pro level, and then I had to stop because I'm so vain. I had to stop and point it out.
Explain it, yeah.
But anyways, another piece of news from today was that Sean Payton has stepped down and retired as coach of the New Orleans Saints after 16 years, 15 played seasons after his 1-year suspension for Bountygate, which was paying players to hurt people. I just feel like that needs to be mentioned in there. Like, he's obviously a great coach, and I don't think he's a bad guy.
He didn't know anything about that.
The good and the bad.
Yeah, sure. I just think that has to be mentioned, that his team was paying.
And we got a movie out of
players.
Home Team with Kevin James. Go see it.
I don't know how that movie got made and has ended up being like a studio like goofball comedy. That's what that turned out to be, I'm pretty sure. It's like Bad News Bears meets, I don't know, Bad News Bears meets the bench warmers or something. Anyways, Sean Payton retired, and we usually don't talk a ton about coaches in fantasy regular, although obviously they impact people. But for the past 15 years. The Saints have been viewed as a team, I think, similarly to the way McVay and Shanahan are talked about right now as destinations for players who can become fantasy stars, who can rise the level of there. And that is no longer the case. So, Geoff, I'm going to throw it back to you as kind of a state of the Saints right now, and notably the fantasy assets remaining on that roster and your expectation going forward.
Well, first, I think it's funny that 1 year without Drew Brees, he's like, screw this, I'm out. Because,
yeah. I mean, to be fair,
yeah,
he put all his chips on Taysom Hill, so that doesn't really work.
Yeah, as far as a fancy perspective, obviously we've got to wait to see who they hire there as a coach. But you're right. I mean, that offense is always an offense that you can find pieces that are going to be valuable. The Alvin Kamara's, the Mike Thomas's, and all these guys going back. Drew Brees, obviously too. One thing I do want to commend him on, though, is I'm sure he knew he was retiring somewhere in the middle of the season, and he never mentioned it once. He didn't make it about him. He didn't become the spectacle. His team's trying to compete for a playoff spot. He could have given the farewell tour. This is, Peyton's last game as a Saint kind of thing. He didn't do that, so he didn't become the spectacle. He kind of just, did it quietly. Today I got the notification. I had no idea he was going to retire. It never even been leaked by anybody. So that's kudos to him for that. But as far as fantasy goes, yeah, you definitely got to wait to see what coach goes here, what direction they're going to go, and the pieces that you may already own, the Alvin Kamara's and such. You got to kind of reevaluate their value going forward.
Yeah, and I think another piece to mention in this with overall fantasy value, they are currently have, I believe it's negative $70 million in cap space going into next year.
Remind me, is that good?
That's pretty good. The cap is fake though, so don't worry about it. The cap's fake news. No, the cap is very much real, and they are very much in a bad cap position. So that means that there could be some cap casualties, which either means players not coming back or they need to dump salaries if they feel that they are in rebuilds, which they very well might view themselves as in. Probably the first piece to go would be Mike Thomas, right? I mean, is there?
Well, he probably should have been gone anyways.
On his way out anyway.
Doesn't want to be there.
Yeah. I mean, until obviously we're just speculating until something happens, though. But it seems that there's a pretty good chance that Mike Thomas is going to be on the move. Obviously, I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, former wide receiver Mike Thomas.
Yeah, who else would
been like 5 Mike Thomas?
There's been a lot. Remember when there were two Adrian? Remember when there were two Adrian Peterson at the same time at running back? That was.
Have we all seen someone draft the wrong one before?
I have. 101. A friend of mine had his dad drafting for him because he couldn't make the draft. It was Adrian Peterson and drafted him. It was hilarious.
It was the Chicago one. Was it
Chicago? Yeah,
yep.
That was good.
But anyways, back to the point.
Only have one.
Throwing this, I'm gonna throw this to you, Andrew. Any dream landing spots for Michael Williams? Michael Thomas for you. Maybe I gave away the ghost there a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to appease your dream of bolstering things for Justin Herbert, the Chargers could be a good spot.
God, imagine the middle of the field with him and Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you've got two beasts there that would just be dominating within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Yeah, no, I think that would be great. God, who else could use a receiver like him?
There's somebody in the playoffs currently that doesn't have a receiver too and hasn't for a very long time.
Chiefs.
The Chiefs, yes. Yeah. They couldn't afford them.
The Chiefs, they've cycled in some of those got the Sammy Watkins.
They got Byron Pringle. They're good.
Totally. Yeah, they seem to make it work
they do.
Without any really distinguished number 2, just because they've got Travis Kelce, who is that de facto number 2. But
I feel like they're more likely to sign a Juju Smith-Schuster in this offseason, which has been reported a little bit that Juju's interested. And they offered him a contract last year for 1 year, but that didn't happen. Jay, any other ideas possibly of dream spots for Michael Thomas?
Those ones are fine. I think anywhere where he can be probably the 1 or the 2 works. If you're looking for fantasy, fantasy value, you got to kind of see where some of the quarterbacks shake out. You immediately kind of go to Green Bay too for a 2. That's a popular one. We don't really know what Rodgers' situation is. Tennessee
Like, just
could be,
you
but they're
think
such
about
a
if
running
not
team,
AJ
so it's still
Yeah.
sort of one of those things. Like if Michael Thomas is a very volume dependent guy, that was the thing. His big year was like he got my 9 million targets, so that's kind of what you're probably looking for there. So I don't know where you find that in this landscape, but you ideally like him in a pass friendly offense that has targets to go around. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of think that he should be a big target for one of these going into their second year quarterback teams, like the Chicago Bears. If they move on from Allen Robinson, get a safety
Bears would be good.
type receiver
Bears would be good.
for a player
thinking-
like Jacksonville. Even the I don't know, like the Jets may feel fine at wide receiver. It looks like they've got some guys who can really play, but they could always use another guy.
I've seen Drake London just got mocked to them by Kuiper. So
Yeah,
I see that happens quite a bit. Which is kind of like Drake London's kind of a Michael Thomas.
He's Michael
model-ish type
Thomas-esque, yeah. So
I mean, I wonder if Atlanta would be, but even though they're in flux, like I don't know what the path is for, but I mean, they're starved.
Yeah, they got to make a decision.
Because speaking of mock drafts, I also saw Daniel Jeremiah mocking Traylon Burks to Atlanta, and that would be interesting to have him opposite Kyle Pitts over there. And then if Calvin Ridley comes back, you sort of have this really interesting triumvirate. But if that doesn't have, like, I could imagine someone like a Michael Thomas slotting in there pretty nicely.
Yeah, first thing, Atlanta needs to decide on Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
First and foremost, like what's going to happen there? Because where are they? What are they doing? That team doesn't seem ready to compete, but they're sitting there with a 37-year-old quarterback. What do you really do with that? We should probably move on to this mock draft, though, since we are getting on almost to a half an hour into this live stream. It was a big weekend, and there was some big news that we had to talk about. So let's get into this draft. Like we said, we're going to do a Superflex tight end premium redraft of the 2019 rookie draft, knowing what we know now and projecting into the future. We are going to go in this order. Myself, then Jeff, then Jay, then Andrew, and back through for 2 rounds. So we'll start off with the 101. I got the easy pick in this draft in a Superflex. It's Kyler Murray. I don't think we really need to talk about why Kyler Murray is the 101, so I think we can move right on to the 102, where already things start to get interesting. Jeff, who we got?
So I was looking at the running backs. Because typically in a rookie draft, I'm looking at running backs at the top of the draft. If Superflex looking for quarterbacks as well. But since the only quarterback that's worth drafting is already off the board, I don't love the running backs in this class. So
I struggled so much with them.
Yeah, I'm going to take the guy that's basically a running back and take Deebo Samuel in the 102.
Yeah, that's where I came down as well with Deebo as my number 2 on there. It's just his usage has been unreal at the end of the season. This like unlocking him has been like such a joy to watch.
Even before the whole running thing, when he was just a receiver, he was second to only Devontae Adams as far as usage goes, which is crazy that he's even getting more usage now than he was before.
Yeah, and was like down the field as well was like the biggest thing, because I think one of the knocks against him early on is that like, oh, his ADOT's going to be so low, his ADOT.
So dumb.
But it was stupid. Also, when you're averaging like 9 yards of yak a catch, he averaged 17 yards a catch this year, I think, overall. And like, I still think his ADOT was middle of the road, but that's crazy how much yak he had.
His ADOT is going to be around 9 because he gets those close to the yardage. Like people were knocking it last year because it was like 1 or 2 because he had a broken foot last year. It's like
it was actually -1 because we had this talk on my podcast. It was a -1 ADOT.
Yeah. It was like he was injured like most of the season. So it's like, let's like it was 8 his rookie year. So like, calm down.
Yeah, let's chill. Let's move on to the 103. Jay.
Well, Jeff took my pick. He sniped me. I'm wearing my Deebo Samuel jersey tonight. It's my guy. I got this for Christmas. The 49ers my team. Josh adopted the Chargers, bolt up as his team. 49ers are my team when the Patriots are gone. So
yeah, we're just California dreaming.
The other guy I think that's right here right up at the top of the ranks for receivers for me is AJ Brown, who was fantastic this weekend. I'll take him at the 3 spot here. Another guy who is just get the ball in his hands, not quite like Debo, but another dangerous guy, always, capable of a big play. Tough season this year with the injuries, but the top guy on Tennessee going forward, and I think still a top 5-ish wide receiver in terms of dynasty going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty banged up this year. That was a weird year overall for that team.
Year,
but he still had those moments of
I think those flashes near the end too, like last game and one of the ones down the stretch.
Not to remind you.
Oh yeah, this is what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, let's go to the 104.
Yeah, this is where it actually I don't think this is necessarily a tough pick, but I'm going with DK Metcalf still here. Kind of a tough, like you would almost say a down year for him. I mean, he still sort of pulled out like a good number 14 wide receiver in PPR, 244 fantasy points. But very much bolstered by touchdowns because he didn't quite break 1,000 yards, had 129 targets for 75 receptions. So the stats felt a little more modest, but it also feels like with the stuff that was going on with Seattle this year, how with Russell Wilson going down and sort of that like inconsistency. And even when he did come back, Russell looked not himself for a while. I think it's nice to see that DK still scraped out like a really good, respectable season. Do we know what's going to happen with Russell Wilson moving forward? I'm not exactly sure. He's obviously one of like the big conversations for the QB carousel. But I don't necessarily think that it's a sure thing that he's leaving. And even if he doesn't leave, like I hope that someone else can get established in there and that they can actually get it to him. Because you see other teams like the Cincinnati Bengals and the 49ers who are just able to get it to their guy. And I feel like that has to be done with someone like DK. So there's a little more projecting with someone like him. But I mean, the guy's a beast. We've said it enough on here. And I think his talent has the upside that you want at the third wide receiver off the board here.
You mean to tell me that Geno Smith's not the future there in Seattle? You don't believe in Geno Smith?
Yeah, I mean, they could just roll with him, right? I mean, why go looking elsewhere when...
You've got it, man.
We're talking about explosive playmakers. You got him right there.
He was the second QB off the board in his class. Wait till we get to that one.
I don't think we're getting that far down. Yeah. Last quick note on DK Metcalf: 29 receiving touchdowns in his first 3 years in the league. He's consistently had really good touchdown upside, and I don't think that goes away anytime soon. Moving on. Sorry, Andrew, to make your point.
Yeah, sorry. The 12 touchdown, I think some people would attribute more to like a regression type candidate, but I just feel like he profiles as like that's what he's got the size, he's got like the ability to fight for balls, and I feel like he's just one of those people like the other big guys like the Mike Evans. Others can pull in those, and I think we can rely on his double digit
it's basically Gabe Davis of the NFC.
Yeah, exactly.
So you knock out what you were looking for, right?
But this is the thing that annoys me with the touchdown regression people out there is like there's any person who has double-digit touchdowns, people all of a sudden get on Twitter and they're like, they're bound to have a regression. And it's like I think I heard it with like Dawson Knox, who had 9 this year. It's not even like that's even that many. When a guy is consistently used in the red zone in that game, it is not just fluky. It can be sometimes where a guy breaks just happens to have like a few long touchdowns and it gets blown out of proportion, but it's scheme as well. And when a guy is consistently getting targets in the red zone, that is worth taking stock in. It's the same thing with Dawson Knox, who we'll get to later in this draft, where it's scheme dependent on a top offense. He's not just getting like Robert Tonyan touchdowns. Same thing with Pat Freiermuth. It's scheme. It's where his targets are coming from. And DK's the same thing. But we should move on to the 105. This is where I started to debate the running backs in this class, who I think I struggled with more than anything of where exactly to put them. But I went with Deontay Johnson.
Oh, I thought you were going to cite me there for a minute. I was like, oh, he's not going to my position, is he?
Well, there was another clear guy here, and with it as a tight end premium, I considered it, but Deontay Johnson was 8th in points per game this year, had 159 targets, has had over 300 targets in the last 2 seasons, and his QB is uncertain, but does it get worse than Ben Roethlisberger? Like, that's the thing. In other places where it's like, oh, you don't know who his QB is going to be next year. No, but I know who his head coach and his offensive coordinator is going to be, and I don't think it's going to get worse. I mean, maybe Mason Rudolph is worse, but like, it's not good, but it's not going to be Mason Rudolph. Let's be honest, everybody. They're going to have someone else in there. Maybe it's a stopgap like Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston or
Jimmy G.
Jimmy G. That's someone I've been talking about. But if it's Jimmy G,
it's fine.
Deontay Johnson through the roof, baby. Close to the line of scrimmage.
Chase Claypool, not so much, maybe. But
not so much. Like, that's the only thing, is if they get a guy who can, like, if they happen to get like Russell Wilson, would it happen to be? Maybe I would consider. Oh, maybe Chase Claypool goes up, but I still think just the stock rises on the offense overall. I'm fine with that. But that sort of floor with Deontay Johnson was really enticing, and it's just like such a solid guy who I still think is a value in a lot of cases in dynasty leagues. I think in your startups, in even in trades, like, he's probably the cheapest wide receiver 1 production guy you can get right now at that age bracket.
Agreed.
Within that realm. So I like Deontay Johnson here. Yeah, there was one other guy who I think you're going to take right now, Geoff. So we'll go to you at the 106.
Yeah, so I'm gonna break the glass on the rim here and go with the tight end, the TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
Obviously, tight end premium. You never go tight end this high in a one tight end league, but in tight end premium with the extra points per reception, TJ Hawkinson was a target monster until he got hurt in the middle of the season. He wasn't quite the same after that. But I mean, early in that season, he was getting 12, 13 targets a game. I think he's the next upper echelon tight end as long as he can stay healthy. Hopefully, he can get a quarterback that's not Goff in coming years here. But I think Hawkinson's got a good chance to be one of those top tier tight ends for a long time.
Yeah, and I think it only bodes well for them to get more established playmakers in that offense. Well, because you saw him get smothered after he had that huge start, but Amon-Ra breaking out and possibly adding a playmaker in this draft and offseason, plus DeAndre Swift obviously being there as well, I think only helps TJ Hawkinson because there'll still be enough to go around. Let's move to our next pick at the 107. Jay.
This is where it gets somewhat tough right here. Torn a little bit between a wide receiver and some running backs, but I think I'm going to stick with the wide receivers here and go with a position that, while I like the running backs, this class, I think the level of them is a little lower. I'll go with the receiver that I think can be an asset for you going forward. I'll go with Terry McLaurin here. Snake bitten just so far with just quarterback play. That's the big thing. This is a guy who's really kind of excelled over that. We've seen him be a staple. He can be a really great wide receiver 2, especially for your team. But flirts with the wide receiver 1 levels of numbers. It just hasn't been totally consistent because of quarterback play. The start of this season, he was on the regular putting up. He had some 27s, 30-point games, 25-point games, scoring touchdowns. That offense eventually just kind of really hit the skids later in the year, where they went through some flux where they didn't have a quarterback. They had some COVID issues later in the year. His play kind of was up and down. I do still like him as around a top 15 wide receiver going forward. I think he's probably right around 15 in my ranks right at this point. He's kind of in a solid tier at that point where you could see those guys fluctuate up and down. And he's been good for you so far in his 3 seasons and really excelled higher than we thought. He was a 3rd rounder that year, a guy that was a steal in rookie drafts coming out of this class. One of the best values probably from this class, from where you got him at that point to what he's been for your fantasy team.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Terry McLaurin's talent. I think like he's the guy who like obviously the production's been hit or miss, but like the eye test tells you that this guy has probably the highest ceiling of any of the guys left in this draft right now from except maybe there's some other deeper cuts who have some like really high ceilings, but he's at least shown some flashes of that. Let's move to our next. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe Terry also had one of the highest contested catch rates.
Well, he had that one absolutely insane catch this year.
Yeah, he tends to do that with touchdowns too, like go up and get it, double coverage, a couple,
Yeah, very skilled there too. So,
does anyone else get Terry McLaurin vibes from Garrett Wilson? Coming out of OSU,
they went to the same school. So.
Same school. They played kind of the same role on that team, like in terms of I don't know, there's something about Garrett Wilson. I think I see Stephon Diggs more than anything, but like Terry McLaurin comes into that same mold of wide receiver as well.
Yeah.
Andrew, let's move to your pick at the 108.
Yeah, this is where it definitely gets really tough to decide because at a certain point this year, I would have thought it was clear which running back I was going with, but I think at this, what? I think I'm still going to go with David Montgomery here. In the end, him and Jacobs had fairly similar production. Jacobs makes it interesting down the stretch, like how good he was. I think he really outperformed Montgomery down that end. But I think things are... I don't know what to expect out of the Raiders and how things are going and whether his usage was more based on Kenyon Drake going at, and I don't know what they'll do moving forward, if the next coach will trust Jacobs or whether that was just the circumstances at the end. Montgomery is seemingly the guy in Chicago, does well, and definitely has the upside to break out some big games. As they continue to develop with Justin Fields, I expect him to continue to get involved with that particular scheme. And I think I'll go with Montgomery ultimately, just the upside alone. So I think he's probably the best bet for sustained production out of this running back class.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to actually my pick because I am taking Josh Jacobs here, and I literally had them sharing a spot.
Very close, right?
They're very close and they're very similar in a large respects where they're both volume dependent running backs who have had some like a little bit of injury, like banged up things. They can't quite complete a season. Both are averaging just shy of or right around 20 touches a game, have good, not great receiving upside. Both average around 4 yards a carry, not being hyper efficient in any ways. Both like have decent, not great touchdown equity. They're both just like if they're your RB2, I think it's fairly stable in that position as well, outside of the injury concern, which is there for any running back. So like I like these guys, but like I can't really see this guy, either of these guys being like top 5 running backs for me. And I mean that in a way of maybe there's at the end of the season, you look in total points like David Montgomery last year and you're like, oh, David Montgomery finished with total points as like RB4 or RB6 or something like that. But like we all know what we mean when we say a top 5 running back. That's like a difference making running back. I don't see either of these guys being a difference making running back for your team. But they may be a steady, stabilizing player for your team. And that's why I struggled so much with where to put them. I ended up with them both right here, right after Terry McLaurin, which I thought was like the end of a tier of players I thought could clearly either are or become difference-making players, and then they slotted in right after. So, yeah, that's where I've got Josh Jacobs. Let's move to the 110. Back to you, Geoff.
All right, so things get really interesting here because the running backs that are left, you got Darrell Henderson, who obviously has Cam Akers to contend with now. You got Miles Sanders, who the Eagles just don't want to give him the football. You got Damian Harris, plays for the Patriots. They always have like 9 running backs. So the running backs are not really a sexy thing. Obviously, quarterback is a definite no. So I'm going to go with a guy that you talked about, Deontay Johnson not being respected. This guy gets zero respect.
on.
He's got one of the best
Come
nicknames.
on.
We call him Third and Renfro on my DS.
Yes! I'm so happy that you picked Renfro here.
Yeah, Renfro, I mean, he didn't come out of nowhere. He's just been one of those consistent PPR, and this year he added touchdowns to his resume where before he really didn't get a lot of touchdowns, but now he's being looked at in the red zone. In one of my redraft leagues, he went undrafted, and I added him like in week 1 or week 2, and I just wrote him the rest of the season. I mean, it was awesome. But yeah, he gets zero respect. No one respects Derek Carr, the quarterback. No one gives any of the Raiders any respect here, but Renfro just continually just does his thing in that offense.
Yeah, he was a guy I picked up in like a lot of dynasty leagues early on because as just like a random guy, like off of waivers last year or the year before, and like could not have paid more dividends. Like he's just good. Like you watch him run routes.
Yep.
And it's crazy. And like I know people are like, oh, he's not athletic. He's pretty athletic. Like he's not a blazer, but like he's physical. Like he had one of the plays of the year with that tackle. I think it was against who was it against? I think it was against the Chargers or was it against the I can't remember. But he basically like saved he saved an interception by knocking the ball away. That was pretty crazy. And he's just quick all around. Does remind me a little bit of Julian Edelman in that kind of mold of a receiver who's just like a really good route runner, gets underneath, more athletic than you'd give him credit for. Yeah, love Hunter Renfro there. Jay, let's move to you at the 111.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Renfro. He was right around this spot for me. The other guy that was right here for me also plays wide receiver and also kind of gets overlooked on the Baltimore Ravens there. That's Marquise Hollywood Brown, who quietly still is a presence there on that team. And this year was about 27th in average points per game, around 14, and had a good season. And honestly, down the end, really, it probably could have been potentially bigger just because, Lamar didn't play down the stretch. You had a lot of Tyler Huntley, a lot to Andrews. Andrews is obviously something to contend with going forward, but he still had around a 26% target share there. He had 139 targets this year, which is kind of wild when you think about just what you think he does, like downfield threat. Yeah. Really commanded the targets there, and I love Bateman coming out. I really like Rashad Bateman, but when you're drafting at Brown, you can draft him kind of lower, and there's still a range of outcomes where maybe the Bateman thing doesn't ever come fully to fruition, where you're getting still quality production from Brown going forward on a team where maybe the targets could spread around enough where he could still be viable. I think that's very, very much in play going forward. So I think he's a nice receiver going forward, kind of in a range with Renfro in drafts. You'll see them go probably in a similar area, and I think Brown could be a good value for you at that spot.
Yeah, I think the only like you said a little bit with the other weapons there, the only concern is him just going down in the pecking order. If Bateman takes a step forward next year, Andrews is obviously there, and then you have J.K. Dobbins coming back.
Yeah, and a running
offense. Yeah, leans a little bit more on the running game or gets Dobbins involved more in the passing game. With Edwards there, and then who knows if they add another playmaker as well, if they want to keep building around Lamar Jackson. Let's move to the 112 and round out this first round. Andrew.
Since, again, it's tight end premium we're going with, I'm going to take my next tight end up, which is Noah Fant. Things were probably shaky, as we've talked about, for a lot of the Denver players and skill positions. Though I expect things to be shaken up a little bit more with the coaching change.
Shakshuka out. Shakshuka out.
Shakshuka.
Yeah. It's a wonderful egg dish with tomato sauce. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now I'll remember that.
It's true. It's great. They love it in Denver.
So, yeah. But regardless, Fant was also another player that started to really come on down the stretch, too. And he, out of the 2019 class, was right up there with the Hawkinson as like they were kind of like that 1A, 1B tight ends. So he certainly got the pedigree and the talent to match. I expect a little more offensive minded scheming to come into that program. next year, and I expect his stock to continue to go up moving forward.
They will have a new coach there in Denver next year that I'm assuming it usually happens where teams go from defensive-minded head coaches to offensive-minded head coaches. Obviously, Fangio, a defensive coach, leaving there, maybe they go with a guy like Bieniemy, maybe they go with any number of the other kind of wunderkind type offensive mind coaches who are out there to be had. Kellen Moore, Nathaniel Hackett, stuff like that. And he's always been good. Like, it's never been a question of his talent, but like his touchdown upside hasn't been there. I think he has 7 touchdowns over the past 2 years, but 130 total catches in the past 2 seasons, with some games missed in there as well. He, as I was talking about earlier, I think he's the last guy on this list who I think has the potential, although he has a much longer way to get there, to be a true difference maker at on your fantasy lineup, particularly in tight end premium, because he's had some PPR upside and some tight end premium upside, but hasn't quite put it all together. And he's just a freak of an athlete. He ran a 4.50 at 6'4", 250 at the combine. That's ridiculous. Guy, it can absolutely fly. He's a mismatch at that position. Let's move back around to the second round to me, and I'm gonna go back to the running back position. I'm gonna take Miles Sanders here. Given the premium that's placed on running backs here, I do think Miles Sanders is a good back, but they just don't use him a lot there, as Geoff was saying. Like, his touches went up towards the end of the season this year. Then he got injured and kind of things fell around. But he's in a system where Jalen Hurts gets a lot of the goal line work. Maybe that changes. Maybe Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback next year. Obviously, that's still kind of in flux. But he's super efficient. Like, he's averaged 5.1 yards per carry for his whole career. And he just will hit a home run. He'll just break one for 80 yards every once in a while. And so I'm just like, I'm not giving up on Miles Sanders yet to be a solid back for you, a solid, consistent back. Again, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a difference maker for you, but I think he could be kind of a high-end RB2 if things work out right for him. But they just got to use him more, because like there was some games where he had like 4 touches this year, and it's just like I don't know necessarily what to do with that. Geoff, let's move over to you at the 202.
All right, so I think I'm going to stick with the running backs here as well, and I'm kind of torn between a couple of guys. Mainly, the two I'm trying to think of is between Damian Harris and Devin Singletary, and I think I'm going to go Devin Singletary. You know, he plays in that really potent offense. Coming down the stretch, he was really involved in the offense, basically made Zach Moss an afterthought. And, you know, attached to Josh Allen for a while. I know that they like to run Josh Allen in the red zone, but I think Devin Singletary, I think, is wheels up for me. I think he's going to have a better year next year because he'll be the guy from week 1 where he wasn't this year. So Singletary, and then he can catch the ball out of the backfield too, which is also nice. So I think in that potent offense, give me Singletary.
Yeah, just some stats from Singletary from his last 6 games, including playoffs. He averaged 17 carries a game, racked up 9 total touchdowns, added 15 receptions, and just looked good. Just like looked like a different person.
Yep.
Overall. Like, so those numbers are terrific. I just want to see those carry over. If they do the next season, then his stock goes up in that offense. But it's so weird that at the end of year 3, all of a sudden Devin Singletary is a thing. So I guess we're all a little hesitant on it, given where he's going in this draft. But like, it's intriguing to say the least.
Yeah, you're intrigued because that offense is that good. You want to be tied to that offense. That's one of the big things you could do in fantasy in general, is tie yourself to a good offense. Get guys on, this year it's like get Buccaneers on your team, or get, top level guys on the Chiefs, or find a good offense and ride that. So the Bills are definitely one of those. It's just, can he sustain it for a whole year? And next year is the last year of his rookie deal too. So that'll be interesting to see how, going forward, is he still on the team in 2 years? Because first contract running back sometimes that's it.
That's
the
it.
team's
They're
moving
done.
on.
Yeah. Jay, let's move to your next pick at the 203.
Yeah, I'll go with the other guy Jeff mentioned there, Damian Harris, of the New England Patriots, and had a great year this year. He became the guy on the team and then sort of entered into a timeshare, partway through the year when they started to trust our boy Ramondre Stevenson more. But on the whole, averaged over 13 fantasy points per game, was a touchdown monster in some of those games. Just, he was the guy they really trusted around the goal line, so really had good touchdown equity this year. He's another back. Once again, all these guys will be entering the last years of their contracts unless they were first round picks. So next year, so it'll be interesting to see what his future is beyond next year. I think your hope with him, if you have him on your team going into next year, is that he gets the better half of a timeshare of whatever backs they have in that system. Obviously, Stevenson should be there. He should still be very viable in fantasy if he can get those touchdowns. And then we'll see where he kind of lands after that, because Patriots, I don't see them having any problem moving on from running backs. So that would be the worry about him going forward. But you got good production from him so far. So I like Harris right here.
Yeah, the crazy thing about Harris to me was not this past year, but 2 years ago. If you look at his usage and his carries, I mean, he's up there with the top running backs, like up with with those top guys. But the touchdowns weren't there because they had Cam Newton. He was getting all those.
Yeah,
touchdowns.
Cam Newton killed him. Yeah, too. He ran well, but like every time they were close, it was Cam who had like 12 or 14,
12 rushing touchdowns.
It was just like, and this year, Mac Jones was perfect for Damian Harris. I think we probably even said it. I think most people probably said it. It was like, oh, well, now Harris becomes interesting because he should get touchdown opportunities at least, and he did, and he cashed in on them. So.
Yeah, I mean, he had like a mini beast mode run this year too. He just looks good when he runs the ball. It's just he has no passing upside. That's the real hampering part. Sure, so he becomes kind of he can have a really, really good game, but if he doesn't get a touchdown,
you're like Garrett Blunt,
points. Yeah,
super touchdown dependent, like in terms of big fantasy games.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to the 204, Andrew.
Yeah. In a draft that outside of Kyler Murray is pretty devoid of quarterback talent, I want to take a guy that I'm not really a big fan of. I'm just going to go with Daniel Jones.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised. I thought you were going somewhere else.
Oh, you're I see. Maybe later.
Maybe.
I'm not going to lie. I might have that said quarterback over Daniel Jones, but we'll be making it
I don't know about that.
That's wild. Yeah, Daniel Jones, obviously someone that I when we talked earlier about quarterbacks and their future with their teams and like unless you have like one of these marquee guys, are you going to stick with them? Daniel Jones definitely from a real football perspective has not impressed. He definitely blows up for some pretty good fantasy game, and then even only playing for 11 games this season, I think still came in as a QB2. He definitely averaged QB2 points. Has decent rushing upside too. He can definitely scramble, has some speed for him, put up almost 300 rushing yards in the 11 games that he played. Again, I think everything kind of comes down to the uncertainty of him continuing to be a starter, and that's definitely scary. But from the fantasy upside alone and maybe what he's produced for you, I think taking him as a second-round quarterback from a super flex perspective, you got to go with that.
Ew. It's just, I don't know.
Come on. You have to rub it. I feel gross right now. I know.
I know. I have a few players before I get to another quarterback, including the one I'm going to take right now in a tight end premium. I'm going to take Dawson Knox. Obviously had good
that was
touchdowns.
The other guy right there.
Yeah.
He 2 tight ends in a row.
Yeah. I think he had, despite being injured, he still had around 80 targets this year, despite missing a few games. Good amount of receptions, was used a lot in the red zone and down the field as well. It's not like he was always just getting that kind of dink and dunk stuff for a tight end. He was getting down the field. catching some balls there. And yeah, it was used heavily in the red zone when healthy. And again, like we were just talking about with Devin Singletary, guys tied to a top 5 offense. He's as good as you're going to get from anyone not named Kelsey, Pitts, Kittle, Andrews, Hawkinson. Outside of that, why not? Why not Knox? He's as good of an option as anyone else.
Say it like Zoidberg.
Why not Knox?
Yeah, his target share is the only scary thing. I think it's like 11%. Like that's the.
It was much higher earlier in the season, and then they just kind of
it fell off.
It was higher.
0 that killed me in some fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, that was a little rough at falling off. But I guess it's still, even if it's I'd rather have a guy have a lesser target share on a high volume offense than a high target share on a low volume offense. So I guess
I'm just saying that's the only thing. He's fine at the back, but like that was the only thing that worries me from like a consistency standpoint. Like,
yeah,
tight end is not consistent, just in general. So when you get
it's not. 5. And this is why I still I still have Fant pretty clearly above him, like in this class, because I do think there's more upside there. But I think Knox is going to be a solid tight end for you in the coming years. Should he stay on the Bills? Let's move to 206, Geoff.
All right, so you definitely sniped me there. I was hoping that Knox would fall one more pick to me, but of course not. So I was kind of left looking at some of the scraps here that we've got left on here at running back. Darrell Henderson's still on the board, but I'm still worried about Cam Akers. But I'm going to go with the backup running back in Dallas. That may not be a backup.
That's my next.
Knew it.
Mr. Tony Pollard. I think he looked just the eye test alone this year. He looked faster than Zeke. He's hitting the hole harder than Zeke was. I think eventually that timeshare is going to be kind of tilted towards Tony Pollard a little bit more. So give me Pollard tied to a good offense as well. So that's what I'm going with here at 206.
Yeah, this is also the last year in Pollard's deal. Like all of these guys are coming up on contract years. Doesn't have that 5th-year option, not being a first-round pick. So he could be a guy who gets a chance somewhere else too if Dallas doesn't, give him another contract or bring him back. Which, if you're Pollard, I think he's primed to go somewhere else and be at least a 1A or 1B of a guy. Rather than having Zeke knocking around there. There's always going to be teams that are going to be looking for a guy like that. And yeah, I agree. He looked great this year. He just was very explosive, has that passing game upside too, looks good in the passing game. So yeah, that's my main, I really want Tony Pollard to go somewhere else and be more used. Jay, let's move to you at the 207.
Yeah, Pollard was my guy there too. I'll go with the guy that Jeff's also mentioned there. I'm going to go with Darrell Henderson, mostly for what he did, I guess, this year. He was obviously in the mix before they unleashed Cam Akers last year a little bit. A guy that people have liked, but he just never completely grabbed that opportunity there on the Rams. But through week 11 this year, he was around close to an RB1. He was kind of fringe by that point of the year, but averaging 15 points a game at that point. So he's shown he can get it done to a degree, was involved in the passing game enough there. He's another guy who's probably going to need to find another opportunity to have value going forward. But he was pretty valuable this year. If you happen to have him, you were able to kind of ride him at the beginning of the year. But I do think that is going to be Akers' show going forward. I mean, if you watch the game this weekend, that was another takeaway. He fumbled. He was bad, but he
had
24 carries.
Terrible times.
Yes.
Could not have been worse times on the goal line and when the game was on the line.
That was one where he fell on his head. The other one was worse, but the fact that he's off an Achilles and they gave him 24 carries, which maybe is bad. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's good or not, but the fact that he's getting that volume and Michelle was healthy. I mean, Henderson, wasn't involved in this game, but I do believe they go that way going forward. So I'm not sure where Henderson's future goes, but running backs sometimes bounce around, and he's proven he can get it done to a degree. So he could be in the mix. I don't think he has as much upside as Pollard. I'd be a little bit more intrigued by Pollard going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew at the 208.
Let's grab another forgotten tight end. I'm gonna go with Irv Smith Jr.
I did forget about.
Almost forgot about him just because. But another argument of like omission in a way. Tyler Conklin there, who just feels like a Jag tight end.
Isn't he in this
came
class
in,
too?
Is he? Oh,
Is
he
he?
is. No, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I must have missed that.
I feel like I
he didn't
saw
make
him
my
on
list.
this list.
But
Maybe I don't know.
he ended
Saw
up
him
as
somewhere.
as tight end 16 on the year. So believing in the talent and the physical ability of Irv Smith Jr., I feel like he can do that much better with that opportunity. I know it's probably like a lazier argument, but I think they like him and want to get him involved when he's healthy again. And if he's used similarly, I think he'll excel better and be a tight end one for you.
I almost took him over Tony Pollard, but I'm like, nah, no one remembers Irv Smith Jr. I'm just gonna my next
I
pick.
had Irv Smith on my next couple picks, but
Yeah, he was coming up for me as well. This next guy, I'm gonna go with at the 209. My last pick here, yeah, this is a 209. Gonna go for Jacoby Myers.
He was close for me.
Just solid. I don't know what else to say
Zero
about him.
touchdown.
Yeah, he had two. He has only had 2 touchdowns in his career,
two.
both of which came this year. With the way he plays his game, kind of close. He's very much a possession receiver for them. Catches a lot of balls. Like I think he had 83 receptions this year. Yeah, 83 on 126 carries. Like even if he can get to like a more consistent touchdown number, I don't think he's ever going to be cracking 10. But if he can catch like 5 touchdowns a year with that kind of target share on the Patriots, which is going to be at least a middle of the pack offense, I think that's a solid wide receiver 3 for you, like with a pretty safe floor. And that's a value. And at this point in the draft, like he's a guy who can be in your lineup, which is something that you can't say for a lot of the guys at this point in the draft. So yeah, give me Jacoby Myers here. Jeff, for your
touchdowns like Kendrick Bourne, he'd be, you know.
Yeah, well, we can't all be Kendrick Bourne, can we? Jeff, let's get your last pick of the 210.
All right, so it's a 210 here. I'm just going to be betting completely on upside. There's a couple guys here that we kind of know who they are. Darius Slayton, McCole Hardman, we kind of know what they are. I don't like either of those guys here. I want to bet on the hopefully the home run that I could get. He's been injured for most of his career. He did come back this year and showed out pretty well. But Mr. Paris Campbell, I loved him coming out. Thought he was going to be the big playmaker in that offense. He just wasn't. So at 210, I'm just going to swing for the fences on this one and hope that he comes back and can remain healthy and make some big plays there in Indy.
He's that guy who I feel like, yeah, it definitely is like a home run swing. Maybe he breaks out, but I feel like he's that guy who, like we did this year and in coming years, he's going to make a big catch every 9 games.
Yeah.
And you're going to go, oh, Paris Campbell, I remember him. And then we don't talk about him for another 9 games.
He's just never healthy, ever.
Yeah.
Like,
it's crazy. It feels a little like Ted Ginnish. Like that type of career trajectory.
It'd be nice if his career turned into Ted Ginn's, because at least Ted Ginn scrapped together, I don't know, some relevant seasons later in his career.
Yeah, he had a top 36 season.
Yeah, like not great, but like it was like Ted Ginn, you know, he
on the same
those fantasy zombies of the past.
Yeah, exactly. Love a fantasy zombie though. Jay, let's go to you at your last pick at the 211.
So I got 2 running backs in this range here. So my choice is a guy who did something, I guess. You know, at least maybe perform.
That's a high bar
in some spots, you know, and probably will never be the lead back on a team going forward, or a guy who has barely played because he's the backup, but when he's played, he's been good, and maybe he gets a job. I'm gonna go with that guy.
Son?
Alexander Madison.
Alexander Madison. His name is Alexander Madison. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Anyways, yeah, it's a Hamilton.
Yes,
we now owe thousands of dollars in royalties. Sorry,
we are screwed. We are now filing for bankruptcy. Madison, anytime Dalvin Cook was hurt, played well. Now, I don't expect he's not going to be the starter on the Vikings. It would be if he ends up somewhere else. So, I mean, when you've gotten to play him, then if you've had him at the end of your bench, you own him, and whether you're the Cook owner or you happen to have the handcuff of the Cook owner, you've gotten some good games out of him when you know he's going to start. And then going forward, he's shown he's capable, so maybe he ends up in a spot. I don't know if he's the upside's not there to be a top 10 back, but if he gets involved on a team, he could still be fantasy viable going forward. The other guy I was debating there was Myles Gaskin, who I feel like that ship sailed in terms of how he got used at the end of the year. Maybe I'm wrong, but he was so feast or famine though, because anytime you played him, I swear, anytime I played him, he sucked. And then he would have his 30-point game.
He got passed by Duke Johnson, who was signed
I don't know what else to say there, but
he was healthy and just they were like, no, Duke's our
maybe that was
option.
just Flores doing a Belichick thing, but I don't know. So
Flores is gone now, so
I know, but I don't know what to do
you're
with anything on that
there
team
is a
from
chance.
a running back. So I'm just gonna pass on.
No,
that
someone's coming in who's
now.
gonna draft a running back. So
Sure.
Yeah, probably. It's probably give me Breezy Hall there. Andrew, let's finish this out with the
I could keep it
2-12.
simple and take Myles Gaskin, but I'm gonna say that in a draft class mostly devoid of QBs outside of Kyler Murray.
No, I
I'm
think this is
finishing
actually a
things out
legit good.
Drew Lock is in this
Minshew,
class.
who
Oh
had-
no.
No. It's Gardner Minshew who came in and filled in twice with pretty decent performances. And when we expect another QB carousel to occur, he seems to be a guy who can always step in and get it done. It's not much longevity on his career, but like there's plenty of times he's come in and been able to maybe patch the ship on a bye week or get it done in a stretch or against an injury for you. Gardner Minshew's always interesting and kind of sustains value as being that journeyman type quarterback that he's become.
He's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, even down to the personality off the field.
Yeah. Douchebag.
Hey, whatever keeps the interest.
Ryan Fitzpatrick is awesome. Did you see him at the Buffalo game?
I know. I was just
shared off.
I'm joking. I'm joking. No, what I was gonna say is, and when I mentioned a little earlier why I kind of wanted to have him over Daniel Jones is because he's given you a better single season than Daniel Jones has given you. Granted, it's not a high bar. He finished his QB 18 as a rookie. The best full season finish that Daniel Jones has had is QB 24. I guess on a points per game basis, Daniel Jones was QB 19 this past season, but he missed like half the season and didn't play for you in the fantasy
a lot of injuries
playoffs.
with him. That's kind of been Jones.
Gardner Minshew as a totality of his first 3 years has been a more useful fantasy asset for you. He has. Like, that's just the reality. It's not meaning he was a terribly useful fantasy asset, but he was more useful than Daniel Jones. And I think he has
high bar.
I think because of his like kind of like as much of his personality is, he's kind of a check down Charlie. He's a game manager and he kind of does that to an extent. He doesn't have a large like ADOT. He takes care of the ball, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He's a very boring vanilla quarterback despite the mustache and the mullet. Which I think bodes well for him being that, like, again, that journeyman quarterback who's going to go from place to place and have his starts a la Tyrod Taylor, a la Alex Smith later in his career, a number of these other guys who we've seen across the board. Fitzpatrick, although obviously Fitzpatrick's more of a gunslinger. Daniel Jones, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think once Daniel Jones loses a starting job, he's lost a start. No one's going to bring him in because he doesn't take care of the football. He turns it over. That's his biggest thing. So I don't see there being a second life for Daniel Jones. Whereas Gardner Minshew, I think he could be a guy who has a season where he's the starter again. Like he could have a Case Keenum season. You know what I mean? That's the type of guy who he could be. Where maybe in 3 years, he's the starter for 16 games again and is at least serviceable and super flex for you. So, yeah, that's the case for Gardner Minshew over Daniel Jones. I know hot takes, spicy takes here that are of major consequence, but that's what I'm saying.
Well, here's the thing. Either one you go with, they're both better than Dwayne Haskins. So
that is true. He did not make this list. That is the end.
Not in my rankings.
That is the end of our draft, though. Any other honorable mentions we want to throw out here? It's pretty rough. I'll throw
my honorable mentions were more dishonorable mentions of like the busts of this class, which were plenty, like Hakeem Butler, like in terms of like that was like more of a fantasy community bust because
what kind of Jedi mind tricks did the Dynasty nerds play on us all to have
N'Keal Harry was a disaster, especially from a Patriots perspective.
I'd give a legit
I'd
give a legit honorable mention maybe to Dearness Johnson, a guy who is definitely a waiver pickup in a lot of came on pretty nicely to fill in for that sort of Kareem Hunt role with the Browns. And he seemed like he was going to be a 1 week wonder, but he kind of gave like a little bit more than that. So I'd say for a guy like that's a little bit of raised stock, and he's definitely continues to be a rosterable guy.
We think about some of these guys who could end up as like the 1Bs to like the Devin Singletaries of the world, who maybe not be able to handle that type of like Jay and I were talking about this before you guys jumped on. Like, you don't want week 4 against the Miami Dolphins for Josh Allen to be your short yardage back. Like, you don't want him taking those hits. So could a guy like Dearness Johnson get 8 to 10 carries a game on the Buffalo Bills next year if they sign him or get him in some capacity, or a guy like that? We're talking about Deontay Foreman as well, something like that. Yeah, I could see Dearness Johnson having that role and maybe being kind of a touchdown vulture for, being a higher usage change of pace back for a pretty good team. Maybe, I don't know, the Chargers or something like that in the role that Justin Jackson filled. Other dishonorable mentions, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Andy Isabella. Oh, some graveyard names here. Jay Sternberger, Kelvin Harmon, Darwin Thompson. Remember the Darwin Thompson craze?
We had that moment.
Yeah.
Man.
There's one guy that I will shout out. He's a deep league guy. He definitely wouldn't be in any redraft leagues, but he had a really good end to the season. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. And that's Antoine Wesley for the Cardinals.
He was not bad.
Yeah. He had 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games of the season. So, I mean, he was a big red zone target for Kyler Murray. So he's one that you can dart throw there in some deep leagues.
Yeah, love that.
Also have Parham in here.
Donald Parham in here. I don't
Parham's
mind
a great
Donald
one.
Parham.
I like him as a sleeper.
Gary Jennings had a moment.
Gary Jennings.
All right, now we're just naming it. Is Scotty Miller?
just read the list. Benny Snell, remember him?
Yeah, it goes down there. Yeah, not great. Not a lot of role there. Actually, another guy who I don't hate the talent, Preston Williams. He's a fairly talented guy if he can kind of find himself in a role. I wouldn't be surprised if he popped up with a little bit of relevance at some day, but other than that, this was
our favorite guy, Lil Jordan Humphrey.
Humphrey, he has some catches.
We like Lil Jordan.
Lil Jordan, he's great. Well, on that note, let's end this podcast. That's all for today's episode. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Let the people know where they can find you, your work, your handles on all the socials.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for having me. This was a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at Geoff Lambert 77. That's Geoff spelled Geoff. Obviously, we have a podcast pretty much nightly now, going for 2 Live Network. You can find us on everywhere, basically YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook Live. We're everywhere. Jay actually has a show on Friday night that you mentioned, the Fancy Cheat Sheet. A great show. It was one of our top shows during the season. So yeah, definitely give me a shout out on Twitter, guys. I'm always active on Twitter and love to hear from some of the fans out there.
Love that. Love the Fantasy Cheat Sheet. Love all the going for 2 content, all the great analysis on the podcast, on the site, especially going into this Dynasty offseason when we'll all be looking for good analysis on this tough to navigate rookie class coming in. So stay tuned to goingfor2.com for all of your fantasy needs there. And also thanks to my 2 brothers, Jay and Andrew. Jay, thanks so much. Where can people find you?
Thanks, Josh. Find me at JC_DFF. I do some writing for Geoff at goingfor2.com. Some Dynasty articles there. I'll try to work on some rookie profiles coming up. We got some good collaboration articles where a bunch of the writers write some stuff. We're dropping who our favorite sleepers are, who our favorite Dynasty buys are. I'm sure we'll do sells and all that type of stuff in the offseason here. So lots of good stuff there. And fantasy cheat sheet that'll be coming back in the off season soon. So we'll keep you posted on that. And yeah, you can check me out at all those places.
Awesome. And Andrew, where can people find you?
Yep, you can find me at Drewcy_music. That's for Instagram and Twitter. And then you can find music like the music we had at the top for my band Ghosts in the Snow. That's ghostsinthesnow.com. That'll provide the links to Instagram, Facebook, and other socials, and also to the streaming sites like Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp. And I'd just like to say that I think we can all agree this 2019 class, I think, got a little bit better this year. I feel like it was a painful class to do the redraft last year. This felt a lot more hopeful.
Yeah, all thanks to Hunter Renfro. Thank you,
right.
Mr.
Oh,
Renfro. Thanks so much. And you can find me at DFFJ Chris. And of course, here on the Brothers of Dynasty every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. With you throughout this off season. Who are we picking? I just want real quick, who are we picking to make the Super Bowl this week? Jeff, who are your picks?
Gotta pick my Niners, and it's gonna be the Chiefs again. I don't think
Jay.
there's nobody.
I'm gonna say Niners just because I have the jersey on, but I really I picked the Rams preseason, so I think Rams Chiefs. But go Debo, go Niners.
And Andrew, who are your picks?
Yeah, I'm going Rams Chiefs.
I'm going to go Rams Chief as well. Sorry, Jeff, you're all alone here.
It's all good.
Bring in Trey Lance, baby.
My Niners.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.